Hello, students. Let's finish chapter 7, user input and while loops. Now, this is part 3. We're going to be drilling down on using a while loop with lists and dictionaries. So using a while loop with lists and dictionaries, the question is posed, why use a while loop with lists and dictionaries? Okay, well, so far, we've worked only with one piece of user information at a time. We received the user input and then printed the input or a response to it. The next time through the while loop, we'd receive another input value and respond to that. But to keep track of many users and pieces of information, we'll need to use lists and dictionaries with our while loops. A for loop is effective for looping through a list, but you shouldn't modify a list inside of a for loop because Python will have trouble keeping track of the items in the list. To modify a list as you work through it, use a while loop. Using while loops with lists and dictionaries allows you to collect, store, and organize lots of input to examine and report on later. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about moving items from one list to another. Have an example up here to go ahead and look at, and it's pretty the documentation on here is pretty good. So on line 3, we've got our first list. It's got Alice, Brian, and Candice, right? And then we have an empty list called confirm users. And basically, we're going to simulate the idea that each user is going to be confirmed and then moved into the confirmed user list. So in our loop here, we're going to say on line 8, while unconfirmed users, okay, while there's an item in this list, as we loop through it, we're going to pop up the last one, okay, and we're going to put it into a variable called current user, not loser, right? And then we're going to say, we're going to have an F string on line 11 saying verifying user. Let me go ahead and get rid of that line. I don't think we need it. Verifying user, that current user, and we're using the title method on there. And then what we do is we use the append method to append the current user to confirm users. So this is kind of like maybe in reality, if you were doing this for real, you'd be calling a separate method to go ahead and perform the analysis to confirm the user. We're just going to go ahead and use this as a simulation. So we're going to verify each user until there are no more unconfirmed users. We're going to move each verified user into a list of unverified user into a list of confirmed users. So this loop right here that starts on line 8 will go ahead and loop through these unconfirmed users and pop out the last one, put it into current user, and then we're just going to say, hey, we're verifying it, and we're going to like just simulate that as something is actually happening. And then we're going to go ahead and append that current user to the confirmed users list. Okay. So when it's popped, it's taken off. So you end up with unconfirmed users being empty and confirmed users being full of the users that were in the first list. Then lastly, we go ahead and display the following users have been confirmed. And we use a for loop because remember, we just said that a for loop is okay for looping through a list. But if you're going to be modifying things to modify a list as you work through it, you should use a while loop. That's what we did on line 8. So as you can see here in the while loop, we're saying verifying Candice, Brian, and Alice. And that's because we're using pop. And as you remember, pop uses that stack idea that the last one is popped off. And then we go to Brian and then Alice. So then we have the following users have been confirmed. In the for loop then shows the items to be in reverse order. Candice, Brian, and Alice. It's in that list. Our next example is moving items. The next example here is removing all instances of special values from a list. Pets is our example on this. And in this particular demo, we've got on line 1, we've got a list. Remember, square brackets is a list. And then we're going to print. Let me just go ahead and run that. We're going to go ahead and print pets. And then we'll use a while loop. And we'll say while cat in pets. And we're going to use, this is an excellent example of how you have to use a while loop to iterate through the items on here and get rid of, because the delete just gets rid of the first one. We have to actually loop through the list and get rid of cat. So we're on line 4, we're saying while cat in pets, pets dot remove cat. So pets is the list, remove is the method, and we're moving based upon a value. So we're looping through this, and then finally we print pets again. So as we can see, we got rid of how many cats? 1, 2, 3 cats in this example. Let's move on to talking about a dictionary here with user input. And in this particular example here, I'm going to go ahead and just run it at the command line. Let me get rid of this information down here. Different ways of doing that. I'm going to go to View, Show Console, and then View, Hide Console, and then I'm going to go ahead and then just type in CMD, right? I'm just going to type in CMD, and I'm going to go ahead and run it at the command line, right? Okay, so let me go ahead and type in Python and the name of this program, which is Mountain Pole, right? Mountain Pole underscore pole .py. And no such file exists. Oh, that's because I called it different. Let me do a dir. And this is, oh, I'm in the wrong folder. So cd ... And I need to move to my part 3 folder, do a dir, and there's my mountain pole file there. So Python guess I should make this a little wider so you can see the full line on there, and press enter. Okay, so what is your name? Bob. What mountain would you like to climb someday? I don't even know any mountains at all. So I'm really at a loss here. What do you all recommend? I'm going to use the examples that he used. Okay, so I usually look up everything that's in the book here. Denali, I don't know where that is, but I'm sure that it actually exists. He picked up some really unusual mountains. Denali, Devil's Thumb, and okay, so would you like to try another? Yes. What is your name? Put in a different person. Now let's try Devil's Thumb. Is that a name of a real mountain? So let another person, we'll say no. So the poll result says that Bob would like to climb Denali and Betty would like to climb Devil's Thumb. Right, so I guess I could, let me see if I could show that over here, a little bit out of the way on here, and let's look at the code again. This design here was really nice. I like this particular example. Line 1, I start with an empty dictionary. Line 2, I set my flag to true. Line 6, I start my loop, and when you say while polling underscore active, that's assumed to be a truth, right? In other words, while true. In other words, while polling active is true. It's kind of like assumed to be true. In that particular case, that's when you, on line 8, you call the input function for your name and the input function for the mountain. So you get 2 strings. And then what do I do here is I store the response in the dictionary, and that's done. The name of the dictionary is responses, brackets, you put name, get, response. So Denali goes with Bob, and Devil's Thumb goes with Betty if you follow what I, as I entered it. And then the next part on here is that after I've populated the dictionary on line 12, is I go ahead and say, would you like to let another person respond? Yes or no? So here you perform a test and you say, if repeat is equal to no, then polling action is false. Of course, the logic on this is that, what do you think will happen if I just misspelled yes? You know, what do you think will happen then, right? So right now, it'll go ahead and set polling active to false if you type in NO. And of course, you know, what if you type in NO, capital NO? Okay, food for thought, right? So of course, you'll have to handle that with some string methods. But anyway, that loop that starts on line 6, let me go ahead and collapse it. So this is how you can collapse this. Isn't that neat? This is a neat way to know whether or not everything is in the loop. So that really on line 20, I have my finishing stage where I use a loop to go ahead and traverse the dictionary, accessing the key and the value. So for name, comma, response, I could have used key value, but remember we want to use descriptive variable names in responses.items. So we're traversing using the items method here, and we're simply saying, you know, Bob would like to climb response. Okay, so that would go ahead and explain how I got this kind of output. Okay. Excellent example that you can go ahead and use in multiple ways. So that was pretty much the end of this part 3. The next part on here was to try it yourself. Let's go ahead and look at that. 7.8. Let me go ahead and run 7.8 unadulterated, because I did make a little minor modification because I had a problem with this problem statement. It says make a list called sandwich orders, which we do, and fill it with the names of various sandwiches. Then make an empty list called finished sandwiches. Okay, that's an empty list. Loop through the list of sandwich orders and print a message for each order, such as, and I think they typed it in wrong, you know, as to what they wanted to say. Because if you look at it, it makes sense to say, I am working on your tuna sandwich. Okay, so I'm working on your current sandwich is what I ended up doing. As each sandwich is being made, then move it to the list of finished sandwiches. So that's being done with the append method. After all the sandwiches have been made, print a message listing each sandwich that was made. Okay, all right. Okay, now then I'll tell you after I run it, I'll tell you what the problem that I had with it, okay? So output says, so the sandwich orders are Let's see now. Let's see now. So here is the loop. While sandwich orders. So it uses the pop method, and we know that uses the stack idea. It gets the last one on the list, and we're going to put that in current sandwich. The last one on the list. I don't know why. I'm assuming that these sandwiches are in order, so that maybe the first person ordered veggie, second person ordered grilled cheese, then turkey, and then roast beef. So I really didn't like the idea that the last one on here is the one that they're working on. Shouldn't they be working on veggie instead of roast beef? But anyway, that's the order. And as they were being popped, and placed in the order in the current sandwich variable. And then we were making a formatted string using that variable. And then we were appending that variable to the finished sandwiches. So it was we're getting rid of it in this list and adding it to the other list as we're looping through it. So that then we loop. Notice how when we're modifying things, we use the while loop, but when we want to just simply loop or traverse through the list, we go ahead and use a for loop. So then you say, I made your roast beef sandwich, I made the turkey sandwich, I made the grill sandwich, I made the veggie sandwich. So I was thinking that maybe it should be reverse, right? So what I did was, I don't know where I just was fooling around, and I just said, you know what, I want to reverse this on here. So on line 5, I went ahead and added the reverse method. Maybe I'm assuming that they something that shouldn't have been assumed. So let me go ahead and run it again. So here we see that the order's changed. So now it says I'm working on your veggie sandwich, you're working on the grilled cheese sandwich, turkey, and then roast beef, because that's the way I think, from left to right. And then hopefully they make the veggie one first, the grill, the turkey, and the roast beef, as the orders are coming in. So maybe I assumed too much on this one. But basically the main ideas here is this is kind of like a blast from the past, going back to, what was it, chapters 3 and 4 on lists, where we talked about the pop method. And we also talked about the append method. So we, in this particular case, understand that in order to modify, the safest way to do it would be to use a while loop, but simply traversing the list, we can use a for loop. Next example on here, no pastrami. So basically the idea was using the list sandwich orders from the exercise 7.8, make sure that the sandwich pastrami appears in the list at least 3 times. It's kind of like the pet application. Add code near the beginning of your program to print a message saying that the deli has run out of pastrami. And then use a while loop to remove all occurrences of pastrami from sandwich orders. Make sure no pastrami sandwich ends up in the finished sandwich. Let me go ahead and run this then. So first thing we say is, hey, I'm sorry, we're all out of pastrami, right? That's done on line 10. So we have a while loop, and in the while loop, this is where we use the remove. Because remember, we talked about how the delete command only deletes the first instance, and then the problem is posed, what if you have several of them? That was never really fully discussed, and that's because they didn't discuss the while loop until later on. So now you would use the remove to traverse the entire list and match up according to value. So in this loop here, we're going to get rid of all the items called pastrami. So then when we print the sandwich orders here, we're able to go ahead and specify that we're working on certain ones and that we're making them. Pretty much, I just left this one the same as before, not reversing the order, because basically the idea here is basically utilizing the remove method along with the append method, whereas, before the previous example, we went ahead and we used the pop method. And the pop method is when you use the pop method when you're going to need to use that one item. In this particular case, see how we assign what's being popped to a variable name, and then we end up using it in a formatted string. That is an instance in which we would use the pop method rather than the remove method. Okay. Our last example on here. Let's see what it is. It's let's see now. It says this one is 7.10. It's called Dream Vacation. Write a program that polls users about their dream vacation. Write a prompt similar to if you could visit one place in the world, where would you go? Include a block of code that prints the results of the poll. Okay, so I need to go ahead and go to my to the CMD. Let me go ahead and go to View. This is the only way I know to get rid of that bottom part on here. I say Show Console, and then View, Hide Console, and then I can go ahead and bring in the CMD. Okay, so I have to move to the appropriate folder. CD ... takes me to the parent, and I'll just do a dir, and I put all my try it yourselves in a folder called TIY. You gotta, I've covered these DOS commands before. They're very similar to Unix commands that you would use in a terminal session. So CD TIY. In this particular case, it's DOS. It's not, case sensitive. And I'm going to go ahead and then run the program here, since it requires me to go ahead and receive input. And you remember, Sublime does not handle input good. Okay, so I'm going to say Python, and then the name of the program, ex7 underscore, I believe it's 10.py. Let me see if I can scroll up a little bit. Yeah, there it is, ex7 underscore 10. And then press enter. And so it says, what's your name? And I'll say Bob. If there was any place that you would like to visit in the world, where would it be? And then someone else, let's say yes. And let's see where Betty wants to go. Really? Okay, we'll say no now. So Bob would like to visit Spain, and Betty would like to visit China. Now, notice how in this particular case, we are using the title method, and that's why we're seeing capitalized first characters on here. So this is an excellent example. Notice on lines 1, 2, and 3, I go ahead and create my prompts, and you don't really need to do it that way. You could build the prompts when you're using the input function. It just makes it cleaner. It's a very nice style. Line 6, we create our dictionary, an empty dictionary. And then on line 8, we prompt. On line 8, excuse me, we have our loop. See how I collapse it? Because this other part here is kind of like finishing tasks. So I'll prompt for name, and then prompt for place. And then I will populate the dictionary. And that's done with like an assignment statement. So place is assigned to responses of name. So Bob gets Spain, and Betty gets China. And then you simply ask, again, would you like to let someone else respond? Yes, no. And if they say, this is interesting, you say if repeat is not equal to yes, then break, right? So break will stop right there if you type in really anything other than yes, right? So then you put the finishing topics on there. Let's go ahead and run it again and experiment with this one more time. So I'm coming back over here, and I'm going to press the up arrow key, and that brings in the previous command. Let's run it again, and just say Fred, right? And where does Fred want to go? England. And I'm just going to press enter and see what happens. So when I press enter, it pretty much drops out, because if repeat is not equal to yes, break. So if it wasn't yes, it's over. It breaks right there. And it goes, breaks out of this loop and goes to the next structure here, which would then say for name, place in responses, and it gives you, it ends up printing the results on here. So break will break out of the loop. The other ones that were covered were, what were the other ones? Were repeat, and there were some excellent examples on that one as well. Okay, my friends, that's pretty much the end of this chapter. So what did you learn in this chapter? It was a long one. It was one of my favorites. It really should have been chapter 3. And he probably saved it to 7 because Sublime doesn't deal with, user input very good. You have to use the command line if you want to stick with it, or do something, or use something else. Like you could use IDLE or the IDLE, right? The Integrated Development Learning Environment. Or you could use Visual Studio Code. Those are all within reach for beginners. Some people like to use, some other editors. You're welcome to try them out. Sometimes it takes a long time to learn a new editor, So sooner or later, you might end up trying something like PyCharm or, there's quite a few other ones. But anyway, in this chapter, you learned how to use input to allow users to provide their own information to your programs. You learned to work with both text and numeric input, and how to use while loops to make your programs run as long as your users want them to. You saw several ways to control the flow of a while loop by setting an active flag, using the break statement, and using the continue statement. You learned how to use a while loop to move items from one list to another, and how to remove all instances of a value from a list. You also learned how while loops can be used with dictionaries. So what are we going to learn in the next chapter? Again, do I say this for every chapter? It's another one of my favorite chapters. Chapter 8 is going to be about functions. So functions allow you to break your programs into small parts, each of which does one specific job. You can call a function as many times as you want, and you can store your functions in separate files. By using functions, you'll be able to write more efficient code, okay, that makes it easier to troubleshoot and maintain, and that can be reused in many different programs. So lots to look forward to in the next chapter. And in the chapters that come, we're going to continue to come back and use the input function. So we can use the input function in the topics that are coming. I think you'll see it. No, I know you will see it in the chapter on functions, as well as some of the other ones that are coming up. But that's all I got to say about this chapter. I want to thank you very much for being with me, and be talking with you in the next video.